Welcome, everyone. My name is Guylaine Green, and I'm the Chief Administrative Officer for the Saskatchewan Association of Recreation Professionals. We will be recording this session for those that are unable to attend today. It will be available on our website for future viewing. If you have any questions during the session, please use the chat function and we will get to them at the end. Before I introduce our speaker, I would like to recognize and acknowledge that the Saskatchewan Association of Recreation Professionals reaches lands covered by Treaties 2, 4, 5, 6, 8, and 10, the traditional territories of the Cree, Dakota, Dene, Lakota, Nakota, and Saulteaux peoples, and homeland of the Métis. We respect and honor the treaties and move forward with Indigenous nations in the spirit of truth, reconciliation, and collaboration. Our speaker today is Megan Jones. Megan is from small town Saskatchewan, just like many of us here today. She obtained a BA in Recreation and Leisure Studies from the University of Alberta and has since obtained a master's degree in Urban and Regional Planning. She recently accepted the position of Program Manager with our association. She also teaches as a sessional instructor at the University of Regina and still finds the time to lead fitness classes. Please welcome Megan Jones.
Thank you, Guylaine. Today's topic, as you all well know, because you registered for it, is a dog's social purpose. I'm going to go over just a little bit about myself first, and then I will start in on the actual presentation, the content. So as Guylaine had mentioned, I did my BA at the University of Alberta in Recreation and Leisure Studies, did my master's degree at the Queen's University in Urban and Regional Planning in Land Use and Real Estate. I am a sessional lecturer at the University of Regina, and I'm currently looking at completing my PhD on a topic similar to this in terms of planning and how we have community development and what are some of the social catalysts. I've done parks and recreation planning for about 18 years, over 18 years, and I'm the program manager for the Saskatchewan Association of Recreation Professionals, and full-time, and this is where I'm at today, I'm actually at the City of Regina as the Senior Development Manager, working in the Land Development Branch. That's my full-time job. So why this topic? That's what we're first going to cover. We're going to cover that off. We're going to define community in a number of different formats. Community can be defined in different ways and by different organizations. I'm going to look a little bit at what the research shows. What does this mean for recreation professionals in terms of community engagement, infrastructure, programs and services, and then therapy. And then I'm going to cover, because we've probably all experienced it a little bit, but it's not all sunshine and rainbows with having dogs in communities. And I wanted to make sure that we acknowledge that there are challenges that are going to have to be overcome. Just this image on this picture here is my dog Murphy. He's actually the one that really inspired this whole conversation, because he was the first dog that I had on my own. I bought a house just so I could have the dog, and he was pretty much my buddy, and I had to say goodbye to him this summer. But he's the catalyst to this conversation. So the learning objectives for today, because I want part of my sessional lecture brain space is providing definitions of community. I'm going to discuss my experience, and I'd like to hear a little bit about yours. Show some of the research findings, discuss opportunities for implementation within your community and your organization. So again, now this is Susie. This is my other big giant bear dog that I have. This is Susie, and this is actually out on our farm. So why this topic? There's a couple of reasons. I noticed through my own experience that I know more people in my community and have stronger relationships because of my dogs, but also because of theirs as well. In fact, often I know the dog's name and I forget the human's name. So I've started to write it down in my phone, both of their names. So I talk to my neighbors, I walk with them, that deepens the relationship. Sometimes there's hour-long conversations or even longer, just standing in the park and just talking. So there's that community component. And then when we're talking about parks and recreation and having those pieces of infrastructure, what kind of infrastructure is required, or what kind of infrastructure is actually desirable to having these types of communities and having these types of activities take place? And then what are some of the programs and services that are associated with it? The programs and services can be with regard to community, they can be with regard to parks and recreation, and they can also be with regard to therapy. And parks and recreation programs and services can be designed to integrate dogs safely. Really, that's the key piece, is integrating them safely within community programs and services. And then there's that therapeutic element of having a dog, not just for the dog owner itself or the family member, but having the therapeutic benefits throughout the community. So my experience, this is my informal research, got to know many of my neighbors through conversations about and with our dogs. Standing on the sidewalk, talking for, like I've said, sometimes an hour, hour and a half, just getting to know them a little bit better. In fact, in the TikTok that I had been sent out just a little bit previous, we walk together. I walk with my two neighbors on each side. Even during the pandemic, they were within my circle because I wanted to make sure that my dog didn't get a lack of socialization, or dogs didn't get a lack of socialization just because of the pandemic. And it gives me a deeper relationship with them. I really know my neighbors. I know a lot about them and created some positive relationships. In fact, and I was going to share this with you, my neighbor directly to the south of me had lots of parties last year. They had just moved into the house. They were having lots of parties, and I was like, oh my goodness, I'm losing my mind. They got a dog. We started walking together, and I know her really well, and I consider her a really good friend now. So that was part of our social catalyst, was actually talking about our dogs. I'm the treat lady. I chuck treats into the backyard, and the dog and I have a really good relationship. And as a result, so do my neighbor and I. Stood outside, and we've had conversations about life. We talk about everything, not just about the dogs, but in terms of what's going on. And in some cases during COVID, and I know a number of other single people in my neighborhood, this was our only social interaction throughout the day, other than maybe Zooming somebody on work, but this was our only in person. And often I had told my vet the same thing. And we share grief. When I lost Murphy in the summer, I had so many amazing neighbors actually cry with me, just because they miss his presence in the neighborhood as well. So that shared grief, but that shared happiness as well. I'm looking at getting a puppy, and I know they're going to be just as excited to actually meet this dog as well. One of the other reasons is they get me up and active and I don't want to be. I love the summer. I love going for walks in the summer. I really don't like walking on days like today, but I know that they need to walk. So here's a picture of myself on the one side, on the left side. In the middle was my Murph Turf, and on the right-hand side is Susie. And I would take them separately. I started taking them separately because they have very different paces and walk, but they got me out, and minus 40, minus 50 days, feels like minus 50. Often I'll have my snow goggles on. So they keep me active. And I'm going to show you some of the research that they've done in England that actually demonstrates that a little bit more. We would visit William Booth. My mother, the reason that I have Murphy is actually my mother got a brain tumor, and she asked me to find Murphy a good home. So I said, okay. And I went and bought a house so that I could have this dog and to give him a good home. And so we would go visit her at William Booth, and that was very, very therapeutic for the residents. My mom said there was a gentleman who used to sit by the front door every night at 7 o'clock because he knew that's when I was coming. 7 o'clock, he was there waiting for pets with Murphy. They really liked it, especially the elderly patients, because he was so tall that they didn't have to bend over, they didn't have to stretch or reach in any way, shape, or form. He would put his head on their lap, and they just loved that. In fact, as I was walking through the neighborhood one day, I got the comment of, "Is that Murphy?" from the car window. And sure enough, it was. It was somebody whose mother had actually moved home from William Booth, and they found Murphy. So they had, again, a nice relationship with Murphy. Didn't know my name, but they knew Murphy's. But there are negative experiences as well. Had my dogs not been as friendly and social as they are, the experience could be quite different. It could be socially isolating. So I want to acknowledge that there are people that if you have a reactive dog, it can actually be very anxiety inducing. Murphy, when I first got him, was very energetic and would run toward people, not in an aggressive way, but he wanted some pets. I had to teach him that that wasn't appropriate because people got scared. I've had videos taken of me, pictures taken of me without permission. A little off, can feel a little uncomfortable. And then near misses with vehicles on a weekly basis. So when I'm crossing 13th Avenue or Victoria, quite often vehicles will not stop. And it's not just a matter of they can't stop, it's just they won't. So there are some instances where it's not always positive, but at the same time, the positive balances out the negative. So I'm going to ask you to put some comments into the chat function of what interested you in this webinar, and I'm going to read some of those out for you. Do you want to share some of those? I'll continue going on, but I'd really love to hear what interested you in today's webinar. So defining community. So community is first a place, and second, a configuration as a way of life, both as to how people do things and what they want to say their institutions and goals. So it's difficult to find one definition of community that appeases everyone and fits everyone's wants and needs. So instead, I've provided a few definitions of community throughout this presentation. And Faith, I knew Faith was going to be on this one. Faith Jasper had said, from a TR perspective, animal therapy and research through the use of community. Personal perspectives, she loves dogs. I know she does. That's great. And dogs, and you, of course, oh, and community. Oh, thank you, Shelley. Dogs have played a huge part in our life, and community is a major priority as well. And that is something that is key, is the community piece. So community is a social group with a common territorial base. So those in the group share interests and have a sense of belonging in the group. And that is ultimately the definition of community that fits with what we are going to be discussing here today. So really there's something in common. You've got a geographical location, and then you've got something, a dog that actually triangulates and brings that together. And then Courtney said, I would love to start my own animal therapy program with youth. Oh, that's great. So I wanted to talk a little bit about placemaking, what makes a place. There's access and linkages, so how are places accessible? There's comfort and image, there's uses and activities, and then there's sociability. And from a placemaking perspective, dogs can contribute to all of those. I'm going to focus on sociability today, just because if I were to try to go in and talk about it in terms of all four of the aspects from the Project for Public Spaces and what makes a great place, we could be here for an hour and a half. So again, today will be a focus on the sociability aspect. This is from the Project for Public Spaces. They're based out of New York City. I've had the wonderful opportunity to take part in a lot of their programs and their training in New York City, which is fantastic. And I want to discuss that today. So what is placemaking? There are places for people outside of home and work. So if you think about it from a perspective of a third place, so you've got home, you've got work, and then you've got the third place. It's really changed over the last couple of years because of COVID-19 and some of the restrictions for public spaces. But they are places for people, and they can be virtual places. Ray Oldenburg, who actually coined the term third place, did not believe that virtual places were going to exist. They didn't qualify, but in terms of our current reality, they are places now. It's an overarching idea and a really hands-on approach for improving a neighborhood, city, or region. And placemaking inspires people to collectively reimagine and reinvent public spaces at the heart of every community. So often you will find dogs in these spaces, especially if they're outdoors. And placemaking strengthens the connection between people and the places that they share. So really placemaking is about creating spaces and places, focuses on transforming the public spaces to strengthen the connections between people. And it's a process that's centered on people. So you need to talk to the people on their needs, their aspirations, their desires, their visions, and it relies strong. There is a strong reliance on community participation. So when I'm talking about places, some of the indoor places that we're talking about here are bars and taverns. Those are the original third places. Keep in mind that those were often for men only, bars and taverns. Some of the other indoor third places are coffee shops, restaurants, cafes, barbershops, salon. I mentioned this in my class when I presented this, that I saw my hairdresser more in person than I saw some other people. The library. Libraries are really changing the format that they have. They're no longer just sit and in the corner. You can actually have spaces where people have meeting rooms and you can have social opportunities that take place in the library. Community gardens and recreation facilities. So you can have indoor community gardens, and I wanted to actually highlight that there's, when you've got, I'm right actually next to the Regina Floral Conservatory. So keeping in mind that there can be community gardens indoors as well. And then recreation facilities, when you've got multiple purposes, multiple things happening in one location, families can travel there together. They don't have to worry about shuttling kids and other family members all around the place. They can go to one space and little Bobby Sue can take part in an activity in one space and the mom can take part in an activity in another, and so on and so forth. The outdoor places include community gardens as well. You've got parks, plazas, open spaces, sidewalks, back alleys, streets, basically any place where you can run into your neighbor or a stranger and engage in conversation. Really, in this discussion, again, it's going to be about geography and dogs. A couple of notes about those pictures. That one picture up in the top right-hand corner is from Parking Day, and I'll talk about that a little bit more just in case you're curious as to why there's a teeter-totter on a road. So this is that image about triangulation. So you've got people, you've got dogs, and then when they meet, they actually have something in common. Because of limited access to indoor facilities, sidewalks, pathways, parks are the most common places for people to gather with dogs. Also due to restrictions within indoor facilities, because the reality is there are people with allergies, there are people with incredible fear of animals as well. So I'll cover that a little bit more into the webinar. Ultimately, placemaking needs to be rooted in public participation. So the community, they need to define and plan for the needs and the wants. They need to be the ones that determine that. And you need to get it through meaningful input. This spectrum along the bottom is the IAP2, which is the International Association of Public Participation. And it's one of it's internationally renowned for its techniques, tools, strategies, and policies for public participation and getting input from public. So you've got everything from inform to consult, involve, collaborate, empower. Often, most of the time, what I've noticed is it's been consulting since the beginning of my career, consulting and involving. It is actually starting to move toward involve, collaborate. And then when you get to empower, you really have a high level of public engagement and ownership can take place. Just be careful and be cautious of that, is because sometimes there's a potential for exclusivity to start taking place where people believe that it is their space, they created it, so nobody else is allowed to use it. So that's something to be very cautious of. But placemaking public participation can take place in any size of community. Just because I took it in New York, I've adapted some of the principles and used them throughout rural Saskatchewan, and having a rural background is really, really helpful in that. So even though you think that you may know what the community wants and needs, you may actually not. So it's best to talk to the community because then they start to take ownership over it. And this is one of my favorite Leslie Knope quotes. What I hear when I'm being yelled at is people carrying loudly at me. There were many, many times where we had town halls, and I don't recommend town halls anymore, where people were carrying very loudly at me as a consultant. And to be honest, I was grateful for their passion, really grateful for their passion. And often we would try to use that and harness it into putting a positive aspect into it, and making sure that we had those that weren't quite as loud and carrying as loudly at me, make sure that we got their input as well through multiple methods of engagement. So what the research shows, there's a number of different pieces of research that I've really loved going through in order to create some high-level overviews for this webinar. So animal-assisted therapy and counseling. So I'm pretty sure that most of you have heard of animal therapy. This is a textbook by, I think it's Christine Chandler, and talks a lot about the neuroscience of the human-animal social connection. It was a fantastic read. I just actually read a few key pieces of information, but it not only helps the patient, but it also helps the animal and the person that is there with the animal as well. I know that when I took Murphy to the William Booth Center, it was incredibly helpful for me and rewarding for me to be able to see him contribute to somebody's mental health and see somebody smile. That was so important, that they got to love, and then he got love, and he loved that. So my mom was an advocate and a proponent for mental health, and she was a counselor. So when we talked about physical fitness, she would often say, you know what, don't forget your mental fitness. So instead of just always, okay, you work out 5 days a week, you might not have to go to counseling 5 days a week, but there is a regular maintenance plan that could be in place. So I've always undergone counseling just to keep a mental check on myself of things that I might not know that are actually bothering me until later. I've noticed that the mental aspect of being able to go out and take Murphy to places, and unfortunately haven't been able to do that for the last couple of years, and Susie will be great too. But going out to those places, the mental benefit for myself was incredible. So it was great for the dog, it was great for the recipients, and it was great for me. So that's something I wanted to share. But this textbook actually goes through the psychophysiological health. It talks about anxiety and distress, about dementia, depression, emotional regulation, and emotional recognition, motivation, self-esteem enhancement, children with developmental disorders, children and adolescents with emotional and behavioral problems, the elderly and nursing home residents, people with physical disability, substance abuse, and psychiatric patients. So this textbook was really great if you want to know a little bit more about it. This one is also a textbook, and I put the two textbooks first, Companion Animals in Human Health. And what I liked about this textbook is that it went beyond health to discuss the quality of life and how animals, and dogs in particular, can really enhance our quality of life. There was a lot of research on cats. I wanted to make sure that I stuck with the dogs, but I do have a cat as well. And she was laying in my arms this morning while I was going through this presentation. And it was therapeutic. So the effect of a therapy dog on socialization, on physiological indicators of stress in persons diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease. So this textbook really takes a look into that. There's an entire chapter of research on this topic. And what happened was they measured the heart rate and blood pressure and skin temperature every 2 minutes of an individual during a 10-minute session. So they had with the dog present or without a dog present. And yes, I can share some resources with cats as well. Actually, these textbooks, I want to make sure that I keep up on the chat. These textbooks do have a lot of information, not just on dogs, but on cats as well, Courtney. Thank you for the question. So they actually looked at the frequency of scores for smiles, tactile contact, looks, physical warmth, and praise. And they were significantly higher when the pet was present, but the physiological indicators were not. So going back just a little bit, I'll go over those again. The heart rate, the blood pressure, and skin temperature, there really wasn't any vast difference between when the pet was present and when they weren't. But the duration of scores for smiles, tactile contact, looks, and lean toward were much higher when the pet was present. So the frequency and the duration of those indicators were actually more frequent, more prominent when the pet was present. So their finding was pets can serve as a useful intervention for increasing socialization for persons with Alzheimer's disease. I don't think any of this is brand new to you, but at the same time, it's always good to have the resources. So the third piece of research that I looked at was dog ownership. So that supports the maintenance of physical activity during poor weather in older English adults. There were cross-sectional results from EPIC Norfolk cohort. I knew this one really interested me just because of the fact that, like I said, I love summer. I love going for walks in the summer. It's not hard to get me motivated. It's a little bit harder when the wind is whipping through your face and you feel like you're getting frostbite within 30 seconds. You get the right clothes, you're good to go. So dog ownership has been shown to encourage physical activity in older adults. So this looked at the specific cohort of older adults. It investigates the role of dog ownership and walking as a means of supporting the maintenance of physical activity. So maintenance of physical activity in older adults during periods of inclement weather. What they found was daily physical activity, so counts per minute, and minutes of sedentary behavior were measured during using accelerometers over 7 days. And there were 3 types of environmental conditions that they looked at: day length, the precipitation, and so daylight length, precipitation, and maximum temperature were matched with physical activity. And so among the 3,000 and some participants, 18% reported that having a dog in their households, and 2/3 of dog owners walked their dogs at least once a day. Regular dog walkers were more active and less sedentary on days with the poorest conditions than non-dog owners were on the days with the best conditions. So in days with the worst conditions, those who walked their dogs had a 20% higher activity levels than non-dog owners. And they spent at least 30 minutes a day with being less sedentary. It's always good to have these stats and this information to go forward if you're wanting to encourage dog parks, the creation of dog parks, for example. So those who walked dogs were consistently more physically active than those who did not, regardless of the environmental conditions. And these large differences can suggest that dog walking, where appropriate, can be a component of interventions to support physical activity in older adults. One of the other pieces is not just dog walking, and that's why I mentioned dog parks. You can also use this information because sometimes dog parks and different types can be very helpful and more safe than walking on sidewalks, especially in icy conditions after we have freezing rain. It's quite comical. I should have taken a video of us walking last week, like penguins down the street after the freezing rain. This one I found was actually really brought this up in my course this past semester. More people talk to you when you have a dog. So dogs as catalysts for social inclusion of people with intellectual disabilities. So it was in Australia. They did a study of group homes. It evaluated the effectiveness of a visiting dog walking program to facilitate encounters with other community members. There were 16 adults with intellectual disabilities. They were assigned to one of 2 groups, and they were matched on key characteristics. So group 1 had 14 one-hour outings in the community with a dog and their handler. Group 2 had 14 outings with a handler alone, followed by an additional 5 outings with a handler and a dog. And the reason they did this was just to make sure it wasn't the group themselves that were not as socially active, but instead that it was actually the difference between having a dog and not having a dog. So within and between group differences were analyzed according to the number of encounters, when a dog was present, and when one was absent. So the number of encounters were significantly higher when a dog was present than when participants went out into the community with a handler alone. So this pattern was reflected in the qualitative data, which suggests that the presence of a dog helped to break those social norms about speaking to strangers. Often it does. It can be a catalyst to conversations, and the discouraging the disrespect towards people with intellectual disabilities. So I really like that one. That one was really, really cool. And I shared it with my sister who works with people with disabilities. I told her to take her dog. So dog walks in those moments where our companion animals demonstrate place-based meaning making. So what that means, because it sounds very wordy, because it is, it's more about the meaning associated with that place according to the animal. It's difficult because understanding what they want and how they make sense of an experience is not quite cut and dried, but we do have animal behaviorists that can tell us a little bit more about that. So this article was about designing slow cities for more than human enrichment. So it was dog tales using narrative methods to understand co-performative placemaking. So that there's more than just human stories about meaning and place. Decentering the human when we frame urban design activities. So what are some of the other things that are prominent within our communities that are not just human-centric? Then there's some less formalized, less academic information that's really encouraging. So the Citizens for Off-Leash Areas, so COLA, points out the benefits of dog parks. They state that it discourages delinquent and criminal activity, and this is in comparison to a vacant space. I wanted to point that out. It discourages delinquent and criminal activity in comparison to a vacant space. It encourages people to get out, enjoy nature, get physically active, and socialize with others in a safe environment. It can be safe. It accommodates senior citizens and those with mobility challenges, people who can't always walk their animals on a leash. So you can actually, you can take the environment and you can actually control it a little bit better to allow for increased accessibility and inclusion. Builds a community of people committed to parks, community involvement, and even the environment. You always get your outliers, you always get your exceptions to the rule, but for the most part, those that have the space and want to continue using the space know the importance of being advocates and stewards of the space. Pet-friendly neighborhoods. This is a great article by Sonia DeLugo. And dog-friendly amenities are not so different from people-friendly ones. So for example, wide sidewalks, lighting, lots of things to see, lots of things to do. Other people are also incredibly helpful. So increasingly citizens or cities are taking the extra step to provide dedicated off-leash dog parks. So it's not without controversy. Some people don't like dog parks. In fact, I've heard that from a number of vets because there are instances where they can be more detrimental than good. But decisions about land use, especially in densely populated areas or communities with limited resources, it can really be fraught with conflict. Oh, sorry, the but is now. Dog-inclusive households are on the rise. So keeping that in mind, that off-leash dog parks and one type of off-leash dog park is not the only solution for everything. Pet-friendly neighborhoods, again, thriving public spaces affect people's happiness, health, social bonds, and overall well-being. Scientific evidence suggests that pets do too. So people with dogs enjoy both physical and mental health benefits. Walking dogs in public can strengthen the community bonds, especially if you have a unique dog. Walkable neighborhoods with wide, well-lit paths and grassy parks with benches are haven for dog walkers, but they also provide meeting spaces where neighbors can greet each other, chat, have informal conversations. But it isn't all sunshine and rainbows. So if you've got a neighborhood or a neighbor with a dog that is constantly barking, it can actually cause conflict between the neighbors. So people who work shift work, those that have kids that are trying to sleep, those that just love to spend time outside and get super annoyed or even angry with a barking dog, it can cause tension between neighbors. I really was very cognizant of that. So when I brought Murphy and Susie into the city, Newfoundlands aren't known to be overly vocal anyway, but I really harnessed that and just tried to curb that behavior. Even though there was a neighbor across the back alley that had a dog that barked all the time. And it actually caused conflict between the two neighbors that were next door because the other one couldn't sit in her backyard without that dog barking all the time. Again, I mentioned earlier that aggressive dogs or leash aggression or fearful dogs can actually disconnect you from the neighborhood. And it can cause that social anxiety of, what are other people thinking? Oh my goodness, I don't know what to do. I'm scared. I don't know what they're thinking. Nobody's going to stop and talk to me because my dog is freaking out here. And then when you get the off-leash dogs that are also part of that situation, and you've got a leash aggressive dog, that can cause conflict between people that have their dogs off leash that are in on-leash areas. And I've watched it many, many times when you have a reactive dog. Dog poop pickup, really the reality is some people are lazy, or sometimes you forget a bag and then you have to go back and pick it up later and you're thinking, I hope nobody saw me, I gotta run back. It has happened, and I think it's happened to the best of us. Or you find out your bag has a hole in it, so you have to run back and grab it at a different time. It happens, but there could be that social that conflict that happens between anybody that witnesses it. And some people are really afraid of dogs. They are afraid of them. They may have had a past experience. They may have grown up in a culture that doesn't have dogs as pets. Instead, they are a nuisance, or they become pack animals. So keeping in mind that some people really are fearful of dogs, and respecting that. So that's my next slide, is that courtesy pays. Be courteous to others, realizing that not everybody loves dogs, not everybody is comfortable around them, and not everybody wants to be around them all the time. I have to remind myself of that. Some people are also just afraid of certain types of dogs, giant dogs. So what does this mean for recreation professionals? Again, going back to community engagement, it always starts with community engagement. Find out what they want, find out what they need, and I really would recommend hiring a professional to do the engagement. The only reason that I state that is that often they are trained in this and can use techniques that you might not know of currently, but you need to provide that information to the professional as well on what are some of the triggers, what are some of the terms that you don't want to use in engagement. So you provide that community context. But it is important to hire a professional. They can tell you what portion of the spectrum you could be along, and that might fit best for your community when you provide them the input. So community engagement first. And I don't recommend town halls. So instead, have an open house where people can come, they can look at different boards and slides and have one-on-one conversations. Infrastructure. Provide a variety of safe and healthy spaces, large and small, all different sizes, because if you do have a dog that can be not quite as social with every single dog, there are some dogs that are great, and not all dogs like each other. They're just like humans. And so for people and their dogs to socialize. So I've shown two different examples here. The bottom one is from Edmonton, where it is an agility park. Probably wouldn't, actually I would have taken Murphy there, but Susie is not very agile. So, but it provides something different other than just a blank space for them to walk around and potentially get bored. They get bored too, so mentally engaging them. Have things for them to do other than just run and go around and sniff things. Dog water parks, and it can be something as small as just one fountain. They will lose their minds. Remember that it's providing a safe environment. You might want to provide more than one. Going back to the sociability, you can have temporary spaces. So these are two images from parking day. We had nobody come talk to us. So I went home and I grabbed Murphy and Susie. And after that, we had so many people come out. They gave treats for Murphy and Susie. The social aspect is the most important quality for a place to achieve, but it's often the most difficult. So how do you do that? Sometimes it can be through puppies, because I found out that the Warehouse Business Improvement District had puppies. So I went home and got Murphy and Susie to pull people into our space. They can be places where people meet friends, greet neighbors, and interact with strangers. One of the other important components is education, and not just through signage. We have to keep in mind that there are others that I like to think of as universal language. making sure that we have pictures that are very self-explanatory or can be self-explanatory, but not just through signage, because if you were to walk into a park and see all of this, very few, I would read it, but very few people would actually read the whole sign. This is from the City of Edmonton. So this is a pamphlet that they actually have for people. So information on pamphlets, websites, videos are helpful. You can use social media, so provide it on your Facebook, Instagram, and even TikTok. I've seen TikTok videos where they've actually outlined, here are some of the things you should do in a fun, engaging way. So make sure that you have that educational component, and we will have future webinars on Social Media 101. So I just wanted to share that and give a little plug for our future webinars on how to do that and how to share some of these ideas in a way that's interactive and yet engaging as well. So therapy for recreation professionals, many studies that we went through have shown the benefit of animals in physical, social, and mental therapy. Bringing animals in with the right disposition to facilities when safe and appropriate. And I would encourage, at William Booth, we actually went to one space because I recognized that not everybody loved dogs and not everybody loved giant dogs. They were scared of them. So I went to an indoor space that was safe and dedicated. We had certain times that I went in. So one, the residents could actually be excited to see the animal. And not only that, if there were allergies or if there was the fear of dogs, they could choose to stay away from that area at that time. So it allowed a safe and healthy environment for socialization between animals and people to take place. So some of the recommendations for recreation professionals: really finding safe ways to integrate dogs within the community. So a variety of sizes of dog off-leash areas, providing sidewalks that are wide enough for you to walk a dog or two next to each other. That educational component, or, I'm going to go back to the sidewalks. Even just having people cut back their hedges enough so that they're not halfway infringing onto the sidewalk and you're kind of like this, and then the dogs get stopped because they love hedges and bushes. Providing that educational component. So again, safe, engaging, interactive ways of educating people, not just a big long sign. You can have those too, because you should have them for liability purposes. But engage the community to get their input. And I should have had that first. So really that community engagement component. What are you looking for? Things are changing all the time, and every different neighborhood will have different needs. Cathedral, where I live, it is very social with dogs. Some of the things that they would need and would require could be different than other neighborhoods throughout the city. So remember that people and their dogs can actually create that place in placemaking. And that includes indoor facilities as well. They can add that therapeutic component. They provide the place, the socialization, the reason for it. And something I wanted to highlight here is that there are social benefits, environmental benefits, there are the physical health benefits, the mental health benefits. The environmental stewardship piece is incredibly important when you have people utilizing your outdoor spaces. The other environmental component, especially if you have a park space that has grass or gravel, an impervious surface where groundwater can actually be absorbed into the soil, that is so helpful for stormwater and not overusing the capacities of your stormwater systems if you have an urban environment. The social benefit and the social health of people between people and also between animals and between people and the animals. The physical health benefits that we discussed in terms of getting out when you otherwise would not want to be going for even just a 20-minute walk, the benefits are exponentially higher. And then mental health, that therapeutic component, but also just the mental health benefit of being physical, of being social, being environmentally aware. And I wanted to propose some questions to you Instead of just saying, hey, does anybody have any questions? Can you think of any additional recommendations as this presentation went on, or did you think of any? And was there anything that you can take back to your place of work? So there are 2 questions here. Feel free to answer them at, I'm going to go back. Feel free to answer them and provide any input within the chat function. And I'll go over those and provide your answers. And I wanted to highlight that Courtney had stated that she'd love to start her own animal therapy program with youth. That is amazing. Youth really, really, they get it. They they love animals. And I know that there's a 12-year-old that's very close to me that was actually undergoing counseling, and it was animal therapeutic counseling. Any questions? Can you think of any additional recommendations as this presentation went on? Anything that you can take back to your place of work? And again, this webinar will be available, so you can have those stats, you can have some of that information for you to be able to take forward to your decision makers. And then Shelley asked the question, from a municipal council perspective, yes, dog and cat issues are most often very volatile. Yes, so many of your thoughts can be used at the council table in deliberations for sure. Great, that's fantastic, because there are pets, there are family members, and when there's conflict between family members, it can become very volatile. If it's starting to affect your sleep, if it's starting to affect your ability to be able to sit in your backyard because you can't have a conversation, that is incredibly, incredibly detrimental to a relationship. They can also be positive as well. So I like that. You can take that piece. And then Courtney said she takes one of her kitties to a retirement residence, and it's always an amazing experience. I don't think I'd take my cat. I've got scratches all over my hands. But I would definitely take Susie, and I think that I'm going to start reaching out to places to see if I could take her. She's so gentle that it would be great. So if anybody in Regina, if you work at any homes and you want a big giant fluff ball, feel free to let me know. She's a teddy bear. So good job, Courtney, for that. Any further questions, comments? We must remember, as you said, not everyone likes or values your pet. We may not understand this, but we must respect it. Yes, Shelley, thank you for that, because it's phenomenal to remember that not everyone is comfortable. I've in fact had people jump onto benches just to get away. And it was a reminder of myself. I pick up on those social cues, but not everybody does. That it was a reminder of, right, not everybody has had positive experiences with pets and animals like I have. So keeping that in mind. That was in Banff. Well, I thank you so very much for your time. I thank you for your thoughts. If you have any questions, do not hesitate to reach out to me. You can write Guylaine, and she'll pass on the email to me. Just office@sarponline.ca, right? Not?
Yeah.
Good. Just make sure, feel free, and she'll pass it along to me, and then I can reach out to you. Thank you so much for sharing your lunch hour with me today. And Guylaine, if you want to take it forward.
I will. Thank you so much, Megan. I think I can speak for everyone where the information was just so good today. It was so very refreshing to hear something very different, but I think that a lot of people can connect to and work with in whatever capacity. So what we'll do is I'm going to be sending everyone a short evaluation. It'll only take you a few seconds to do, but maybe Megan, what we'll do first is I'll get the names of those textbooks from you, and we'll add it into the email, as well as the additional resources for some cats that Courtney was asking about. So maybe I'll get that information from you, and it'll just be a bit of a delay when you get this email from me, but maybe we'll apart from a survey and an evaluation, will get you a little bit more information. So if you aren't a member of SARP, please consider joining us. Send me an email or give us a call if you have any questions. For our current members, please remember that 2022 is like in a blink, only a few sleeps away. So it's time to renew your membership with us. So again, if you're having troubles with that, you can't forget or can't remember your login, please don't create something new. Give me a call first and I'll help you go through it over the phone. So thank you very much, everybody, for joining us. Thank you, Megan. And we'll see you all in 2022. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. And be honest with your results, because this is the first time I've given this presentation. Be honest.